and welcome to the video on equivalent units for Chapter 3. Please make sure that you look through the PowerPoint slides as well as read the chapter for additional information on equivalent units and the concept of equivalent units before watching this video. This is one of the harder concepts that we talk about in managerial accounting. What are equivalent units? The reason that we need to calculate our equivalent units is for process costing. Process costing is when there are different steps within the manufacturing process before the goods end up in finished goods. So when you're looking at different processes that have work in process, you're never going to have work that is 100% completed. So for example, in this scenario we have 10,000 gallons of paint that is produced at a cost of $10 per gallon. The total cost is $100,000. Assume that we finished 8,000 units and that 2,000 units are left in the WIP account, meaning work in process. The 2,000 units in WIP are 50% complete. So equivalent units is the number of finished units that can be made from the materials, labor, and overhead included in partially completed units. If we were simply looking at just the ending inventory, the equivalent units would be 2,000 units times 50% complete is equivalent to 1,000 units that are 100% complete. This doesn't mean that there are 1,000 units that are actually 100% complete. This is a concept, or in theory, we can assume that 2,000 units that are 50% complete would be the equivalent of a total of 1,000 finished units. So going back to the same example, in beginning inventory, we have 2,000 gallons of paint that are 80% complete. We also have $1,600 in direct materials costs and $1,000 in conversion costs. Conversion costs are your direct labor and overhead. Another 12,000 gallons are started during the period with direct material cost of $20,000 and conversion costs of $73.70. So what does this mean? What do we do with this information? Well, the objective here is to find out, of those 12,000 gallons, what are the costs that should be transferred over to finished goods? I'm sorry, not the 12,000. First we need to figure out how much is transferred over to finished goods and then the cost of that. So let's go back to our simple T accounts to start with. Okay, we have 2,000 units that are 80% completed. I'll just put 80% in parentheses. It's going to be $2,600 in total because it's $1,600 in direct materials and $1,000 in conversion costs. Okay, so here's the first thing that you need to understand. We're looking at units as well as costs. So first we need to calculate the units and then use the cost information to calculate the total cost for the units that should be transferred over to finished goods. Okay, so we have costs of direct materials. I'm sorry, let me do this. So this was started during period. Okay, and that's going to be 12,000 gallons with costs of 20,000 plus 20,000 for direct materials and 7,370 for conversion. So that's going to give us 27,370. Okay. Let's change that over to a $sign. And then it tells us that for ending inventory, we have 2,000 units at 50% completed. Okay, so ending inventory is 2,000 units. I'm sorry, we have ending inventory here of 1,000 units that are 50% completed. So 1,000 units, 50% completed. Okay? So first we need to figure out how much we actually completed during the period that's going to be sent over to finished goods. Okay, So this goes back to what we learned in Chapter 2 to calculate our units completed during the period. This is going to be same under the FIFO and weighted average method. Please refer to your book for additional detail on these methods. But there's 2 types of methods, and this is step 1 of 4 steps in the process. Okay? So we know our beginning units. This is before we even calculate equivalent units, okay? So this is just straight up units. So we have 2,000 in the beginning, plus we started 12,000, and we have 1,000 ending. So it's going to be the 2,000 plus 12 minus 1, okay? So that means we have 13,000 units that were transferred over to finished goods. Now here is why we need to calculate equivalent units, because we don't know how much this costs us and how much of this needs to be transferred over to the finished goods. We need to calculate the cost associated here. Okay? So that's our end game. That's our objective. So this part right here is going to be the same for both methods. However, for the FIFO method, we have an additional step. So if you remember from the book, the FIFO method assumes that everything in beginning inventory will be finished, completed, and moved over to finished goods. Therefore, we're not going to include our beginning inventory in our equivalent units calculation. So in order to get the units started and completed during the period, we're going to exclude our beginning units. Okay? So units completed and started during the period is going to be 11,000. Okay? We're going to focus on the FIFO method first. So the second step is telling us to calculate the equivalent units. So here we look at the beginning, we add what was completed during the period, and we add our ending WIP. Okay? This is a little bit different than step 1. First, we have to convert this information into equivalent units, and then we have to add them all up to get the equivalent units that were completed during the period. So, our beginning WIP units, we have 2,000 in beginning. However, 80% of that is already completed. So we need to calculate what we're going to finish during the period. Because we've already done 80% in the prior period, there's 20% remaining to be finished in this period. So we're going to take 2,000 times 20%. Okay? Then we're going to take the 11,000 that we calculated here, which was started and completed during the period at 100%. And then we're going to take our ending WIP. We said here it's 1,000 and is 50% completed. That means that we finished 50,000 during this period. If we had said that we had 70% completed, then this would be times 70% because that's what we finished during this period. So it's 1,000 times 50%. That gives us equivalent units of 11,900. Now we can calculate the cost per equivalent unit. Okay? So that's where we start using this information, the cost information. So there's 2 steps. First, we need to calculate the production costs and divide it by the equivalent units. Well, we already know the equivalent units is 11,900. How do we calculate the production cost? FIFO does not include this beginning cost because it assumes that it's related to last period. So remember how we did not include the beginning inventory here? That means we don't include the costs related to that either, okay? So our total cost during the period is going to be the 27,370. So then we take the 27,370 and divide it by 11,900, and we get an equivalent unit per cost of $2.30. Now we can finally move on to the fourth step. This is where we're going to calculate the costs that are transferred to the finished goods and also the costs of our ending inventory. EU here stands for equivalent units. So let's do our ending inventory first. Remember we said that we had 1,000 at 50%, so we're going to have 1,000 units times 50%. That gives us the number of units, which is 500. And then we're simply going to multiply that by our equivalent units cost per unit. So that means the ending inventory here under the FIFO method is going to be 150. Okay? And now we can calculate our cost for the 13,000. So we're going to calculate this by looking at the total costs that we need to allocate. So it's going to be equals 2,600 plus 27,370. Okay. And the cost from the prior period we can exclude because it was not incurred this period. We can also exclude the cost of my ending inventory. And when we add those up, we know that our costs, excuse me, for this 13,000 should be 26,220. Okay? So that's what the objective is. Now let's look at under the weighted average and how it's different. Okay? So here, this part is not applicable. Okay? Whatever we completed during the period, we're going to assume that was started and completed during the period. The weighted average takes into consideration all of the units in the WIP account, okay? So we're going to start with our beginning WIP. We need to translate that into equivalent units. Because we're assuming that it's all done during this period and we're including beginning inventory here, it's going to be 0 for the weighted average method. Then we're going to use our 13,000 units that we calculated above. And it's going to be the same thing here, 1,000 ending times 50%, to give us an equivalent unit of 13,500. Okay? We move on to step 3, calculate the cost per equivalent unit. We're going to take all of our costs. So it's going to be the 2,600 because we assume that we did it all this period, plus the 27,370 gives us 29,970. And then we take the equivalent units from above and we get an a cost per equivalent unit of 220. We're going to do the same thing here. Oh, sorry, I never finished this here. Okay. The cost to complete units this period is going to be this. And then we have our costs from the prior period. Sorry, that's 2,600. So the total cost for finished goods that's going to be transferred is actually 28,820. Sorry about that. Skipped a step there. Okay. Excuse me. So now here we're going to do the same thing. Calculate our ending inventory, which is 500 units, times our cost per unit. Of 222. That gives us 110. So we're going to take our total cost of 29,970. We're going to assume there are no costs in the prior period under the weighted average because everything was done this period. And we're going to subtract our ending inventory. And it's going to give us 28,860. So here it's going to be 0, and here it's going to be 28,860. And that gives us this number under weighted average. So weighted average equals 28,860, and FIFO is 28,820. Okay? So that's how we calculate equivalent units and why we use that process. I'll be posting this spreadsheet in the video lectures page, and just here's a summary of the information that I went through. And if you have any questions, please post them in the discussion forum for this week, and I will be more than happy to answer those questions. Thank you.